Welcome back to the Deeply Rested podcast. I am so excited to introduce you to today's guest. She is my friend and writing coach, Paulette Perhach, and we are taking a deep dive into Paulette's journey with ADHD. We start with her childhood and work our way up to her discovery and her official diagnosis that she has ADHD as an adult. Paulette is really an open book in this conversation. She shares so vulnerably and honestly about how she has harnessed her gifts as a person with ADHD to create a business that truly works for her and is shepherding her on the path to becoming deeply rested. So if you have ADHD, or if you've ever wondered if you have ADHD, this episode is going to really hit home for you. To tell you a bit more about Paulette, she is a widely published author whose work has appeared in outlets like the New York Times, the Washington Post, and McSweeney's, and she is known for her viral essays and her book, Welcome to the Writer's Life. She coaches writers, leads meditation and writing sessions, and has earned accolades such as the Hugo House Fellowship and a nomination for Best of the Net. Paulette is an incredibly gifted, creative person, and her willingness to show us who she really is and to teach us the lessons that she has learned along her own journey with ADHD are truly a gift. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Paulette Perhach. Welcome to Deeply Rested, the podcast that helps people doing good work in the world take incredibly good care of themselves. I'm your host, retired therapist and disillusioned business coach, Maegan Megginson. I'm on a mission to help people like you unlearn the rules that keep you trapped in self-doubt so that you can recover from burnout and finally become deeply rested. If you enjoyed today's show, be sure to subscribe to this podcast and join our weekly newsletter at deeplyrested.com/newsletter. Now, it's time for the show. Hi, Paulette. Welcome to the show.
Hi. Thanks for having me, Megan.
I am so excited that you are here, and I am so excited to talk to you today about your journey with ADHD as a business owner. I don't have ADHD, and it's something I want to understand better. I have a lot of questions about, so I'm personally excited to learn from you today, and I just really appreciate your willingness to be here and to share your personal story about your own journey with this diagnosis.
Yeah, my journey.
Your journey.
My messy, crazy journey with ADHD.
Yeah.
So fun.
I mean, I feel like in the last 5 years, it's just every day I meet a new woman who's like, I just found out I have ADHD.
Yeah, it was the pandemic. A lot of people lost their structures and their lives just absolutely started to fall apart.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense, actually. So you're in great company, and I can't wait to receive some of your wisdom today. So obviously, Paulette, you and I know each other, but the people don't know you, and I thought it would be a really great place to start to have you tell us a little bit about all of the different hats that you wear as a business owner. What are all of the different things that you do to make money?
Come over with me to my closet of hats that will burst open if we even crack the door. So always trying to narrow this down, but I am a writer first. And because sometimes writers don't get paid very much, I also make a living ghostwriting. I do journalism, and I also serve writers. My mom was a first grade teacher, and so I am a teacher, but of adults. And so I do classes and courses, and I have a software for writers called the Writers Mission Control Center, which became approved as an official software the month that I got diagnosed with ADHD. And I was like, it's all coming together.
Whoa.
And yeah.
And in many ways, the Mission Control Center is like an organizational software.
Yeah, it's
for
like
writers.
The brain I wasn't born with.
Right. Great. Yeah. This is going to be really fun today, exploring how all of these threads have woven together in your life to create this really gorgeous and fascinating tapestry. You're a freelance writer, you're a ghost writer, you're a coach for writers, you've created this incredible software for writers, full disclosure, I'm taking a writing class with Paulette right now, and it's incredible. You are such a fantastic instructor and facilitator.
Thank you.
You can find Paulette's essays all over the internet. You're everywhere. You do so many things, and it sounds like a lot to manage as a person with ADHD.
Yeah, it is a lot to manage, but it is, I feel like if you read like Cal Newport's Deep Work, I'm like, okay, how do I rein this in? And it always just feels like the answer is don't have ADHD. So, it's like we need that texture in our day. We need to be like, what else? What this? I'm interested in this and this. And I spent so many years trying to be like, pick one thing and then realizing, no, I'm a person who loves to learn. That's part of why I love journalism.
Whoa. You're saying something right now, like I'm feeling called out in the best way, because I read Deep Work years ago and it was really transformative for me as a person who doesn't have ADHD. And then I went to my audience and was just like, well, you got to read this book. Everybody needs to do Deep Work. And I had never thought until this very moment, wait, that's actually not true. That is a strategy that does not work well for neurodivergent brains.
I mean, it's all about, picture this just like wheel with hooks on it. And if the hook hooks into something, it will spin and spin and spin and spin. And that's hyperfocus. So like I almost did jewelry as my career, and I would sit on the couch and I would put on the same movie every day. I would put on American Beauty.
No way. You're watching the
like
bag.
In college. And I would sit there and I would make jewelry for 6 hours.
Wow.
And I would just do it until I was so exhausted that I couldn't clean up, all your supplies are everywhere. And I would just kind of like throw it back in the box and then hate myself the next day. But I mean, so yeah, 4 hours. If I got hyper focus kick in, yes, 4 hours. If not, 0 hours.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. So if I'm hearing you correctly, the way in which you wear all of these different hats, you're saying, actually works really well for you as a person with ADHD.
In theory. There's also, for my career, for money making, sometimes I'm like, God, if I were just the queen of this little niche, which is, it's advice that I give to my coaching students who are doing freelancing. I'm like, listen, the easiest way to become very successful is to be the queen or king of one little niche, right? Yeah. Pick one, go with it. And yet I don't do that, or I haven't been able to do that. And I've just had to get to the place where I'm like, I don't do that. I'm fine with that. Maybe my niche will be like ADHD writers. I don't know. But I love learning about new things. And, I don't just want to write about one thing. Susan Orland doesn't have to write about one thing.
Yeah, why do you? I think that's one element that is so resonant with this larger, deeply rested conversation, which is how do we make our businesses really work for us? And for many of us, ADHD or no, lots of the common teachings about how we're supposed to do it or what we're supposed to do just don't resonate with who we are as people. And I think that's something I really witness you modeling in the world, is how to do your business in a way that really works for you and your personality. We have a lot to learn from you.
Thank you. Yeah, I feel that the way that the United States is set up does not flow with nature or humanity.
Correct.
And I think that's especially true for people with ADHD. And so I think I felt it more acutely. But in general, I like to help people just be creative with their business. And when I think about what am I really about, I try to be about the deepest reality. And if the deepest reality is that we are floating in space with all of this, all this beauty, all these animals and plants that evolved from nothing, why in the FUCK are we going to a box 40 hours a week and typing on our little screens? Yeah. I don't want to sit in a box. I don't want to sit in a literal box. And when it's beautiful outside, I want to go outside. And when it's raining, I want to work. And I want to be able to nap when my body needs sleep. Those are freedoms that I have fought really hard and sacrificed a lot to get in my life.
Preach. I love that. Okay, we're going to talk more about that in a little bit. We're going to talk more about how you manage your multiple businesses or the multiple arms of your businesses as a person with ADHD. But before we do that, I want to just take a journey back in time. If we could just step into my time machine and let's travel back to the early days of Paulette's life. And I know from our previous conversations that you've been doing a lot of reflecting this year on how ADHD has been present in your life for a really long time. So in retrospect, tell us about what life was like for you as a kid. What was school like for you as a kid? How can you see now the ways in which ADHD was present in your life in the early days?
Yeah, well, 4 out of 5 people in my family have ADHD.
Whoa.
So our house was really chaotic. It was very loving and very fun and very chaotic. And I think that the question that ADHD and a diagnosis answers is why. Why can't we just keep our laundry done? Why can't we keep the kitchen clean? Why can't you remember, XYZ? And I feel a bit of guilt for like the standards that I held my parents to, or like the things that I was really down on them about, realizing now that that's ADHD. And I'm like, dude, I don't have kids and I have a smartphone. And I still mess up sometimes. My mom's like, it was the 80s. Like, she would like forget to pick me up. And, I felt really lucky to have a loving family. But also then my family went broke when I was 8. My family went bankrupt. And there was just a lot of financial stress and a lot of financial chaos too. So always feeling, number one, I always felt there was something different about me because I had ADHD. So I was different. And number two, I felt left out because we were broke and I couldn't participate in the same activities. I couldn't have the same things and have the same like physical, material expression of my life that my friends had. And that was really hard.
Did you know when you were 8 that you had ADHD?
No, I just got diagnosed 4 years ago.
That's what I thought. I was like, okay, wait, let me check that out. So you're 8 years old.
No, I just felt like something was different. I didn't know what.
Yes. You knew that your life was chaotic. You knew your family didn't function in the same way that other families functioned around you. You go bankrupt. You're now experiencing, a life in poverty. So almost everything about your lived experience feels different than the kids you're surrounded with at school.
I wouldn't go so far as to say like poverty. It wasn't generational. And I also felt a bit of guilt that like we threw ourselves in there. We were living on the water with a Cadillac. My dad had a really good job, so it wasn't systemic. I was always fed. It was just like we have to go to the thrift store. My mom's car never worked. It was an embarrassing level of we were broke is what I always say.
We were broke. Thanks for correcting me on that. That's and for helping us understand and your family what that distinction was between, we're bankrupt, we're broke, but we're not in poverty. That there was this way in which you were understanding it that really informed how, as a child, you were showing up in the world.
Yeah, I think there was always a knowledge, like we weren't poor, but we were broke, for sure.
We weren't poor, but we were broke. Yeah. And we were chaotic. And what was happening here? It sounds like there was a lot of judgment that you had at the time about your family.
A lot of shame.
A lot of shame.
Just not about them as people. Like my mom is so wonderful. My dad was so wonderful, so funny, so great. He died when I was 17 and, his best friend's wife, whenever I happened to see her, through the years, she said, your father's funeral was still the biggest funeral I've ever been to. So he was amazing, But shame around how it looked in the house or like what we could afford or not afford.
Yeah. And what about in school? In hindsight, did ADHD show up for you in your studies?
Oh my God, yeah. In 6th grade, I went to middle school and it was like, I had a lot of teachers that I felt kind of had given up and they just gave us busy work and I just didn't do it. Sometimes it felt like, listen, like we're going to pretend we're teaching, you're going to pretend we're learning, everyone just do your shit. We're going to get out of here together. We're all going to make it. And I had in 6th grade, like a 0% in one class by midterm. And
because you had done 0 things.
I had done 0 things.
Impressive.
And my report card was DADD. And I was like, I did it for you, Dad.
That's funny. I'm like, where's the Y? Yeah.
I know. He did not buy it.
What was the A in?
Like English.
Okay. Oh, interesting. Yeah. Okay.
And, it's funny, like, it's awkward to say, but like I was in the gifted program. As my friend said, if they explained to the other children the levels of like drug abuse and depression in the gifted kids, the other kids wouldn't feel so bad. And that was a place where I was free to do projects, where I could be creative, where there was like, it wasn't so restricted. And I just loved it. I loved that project-based learning, which was really nice.
Interesting. So yeah, these school age years, you're really discovering without the framework of ADHD, because it wasn't really around at that point in time, you're discovering in this more organic way, where do I thrive and where do I struggle?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely wouldn't have put it in those terms.
Right. This is retrospective. Yeah.
I just remember like wanting to beat the system.
Yeah.
I think I was bored. I wasn't engaged. And the way that I played it was like, how little work can I do and still get good grades? And when I graduated college, I remember this feeling of like, oh, I did it. I'm supposed to be educated now. Like, oh shit. And it's funny because when I was 28, I kind of discovered like self-education, and I'm like such a learning nerd now.
Yeah. What was it about self-education that pulled you in?
It was hitting rock bottom.
All good stories start with hitting rock bottom.
Yeah, this is very uncomfortable. So, well, what really kind of turned me onto it was when I joined Peace Corps, and I lived in a little town in Paraguay. We had terrible Wi-Fi, not Wi-Fi, but we had internet access. And long story short, middle of my service, I snapped and bought a horse. And so I was like, what do I do with this? So I went on YouTube and I like Googled like how to ride horse. And I was transported to this woman in this amazing corral in this like completely professional outfit. Like she seemed like a total professional. And I was learning from her from the middle of South America. And I was like, this is wild. Like we've all this just started to happen. And we haven't thought about, you know, how we're closer to the Matrix. We can just plug it in your head and be like, I know Kung Fu. Then, you know, the 1500s where it's like, you can learn something if someone in your village knows it and you have the money to get them to teach you. It's kind of amazing. And so when I came back from Peace Corps, like the most uncomfortable time of my life, like I had to start temping like 2 days after I came back. I'm in this tiny cubicle the size of a bathroom stall doing data entry. And that was when I discovered this I'm not staying here energy. And I was like, I'm going to use this experience to learn 10 key, like the 10 key type, you know, little keypad. And I would take a little lesson every day. And, you know, and then I moved up from that to like an executive assistant to the CEO at the company, where I got to see someone who had yelled at us get yelled at by him for her attitude, which was delicious.
I'm really appreciating hearing the way in which you learned over time. Again, you didn't know you had ADHD. You weren't thinking about any of this explicitly, but there's so much power and wisdom that comes from examining how we got to where we are today. And I hear that there was this way that you resisted the status quo, right? You resisted structure. You resisted being told this is how you have to do and this is when you have to do it. That was always a challenge. But you also were finding this groove around project-based work and creative outlets and self-study and really following where intuition and creativity were leading you. Like in so many ways, your ADHD helped you follow your intuitive calls and resist what people were telling you you should be doing.
Very true. Yeah, I mean, I remember in middle school when I was like so lazy, you know, that we got this assignment to make a, you know, physical representation of something we were learning in a unit about the Holocaust. And I made this, you know, hillside with a bunker in it and like little people. And I was like, it was just kind of one of my first memories of like hyper focus. Like I was just like, I couldn't stop. Like I was obsessed with it. I made everyone in my like group stay up till 10 o'clock working on it, you know, and I think that's like the power of ADHD, where it's like when you catch that hook, like it's on. So you've got to stick with stuff where it hooks you.
There's a through line here that's really resonating for me. I believe that many of the business owners, the small business owners who are struggling with burnout and overwhelm and stressed, are struggling in large part because they're trying so hard to do what they think they're supposed to be doing and the way they're supposed to be doing it. And it takes many of us a really long time to learn what you actually discovered pretty early in your life, which is fuck the man, follow the flow. And you follow the flow and then you find these delicious grooves of hyperfocus where you are just like so in this creative space. I mean, looking at your face right now, you like light up when you talk about the way it felt to be working on this project. Do you feel like a similar pattern happens for you in business today?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm looking for the things where it's like, what is the crossover? Like the class that you're in, the essay class, designing the slides, designing the curriculum, talking to the guest speakers, talking to the students. That's just the good stuff for me. I love that, right? And because I can do it in a group, this is a good investment of my time. And that I can say, okay, that is something where it's a win-win, right? I think we focus on when we like hiring out. I'm a big proponent of hiring out help where you need it. My criteria are, is this something I've been struggling with my whole life? And number two, is it really important? So things like working out, having, a trainer if you can. I've used a trainer online who lives in Colombia because I wanted to practice my Spanish, and then having an assistant if you need to. And people are like, oh, that's so fancy. I'm like, the rest of my life is very not fancy so that I can afford that. Like I make sacrifices to do that because I think that's what's going to set the foundation for me to take off in the future. Wow. Like I'm not going to get there unless I handle that stuff first.
I want to emphasize these two questions that like your keystone questions here are, have I struggled with this my whole life? And how important is it right now? Am I getting that right?
So I think like it's a double yes. Is this very important to my life?
Yes. And have I always struggled with this?
Yeah.
Okay. So when you get two yeses, this is something I need to pay for in my business. If I want to move things forward, I'm going to need to just swallow the pill and pay for the assistant or pay for the trainer or fill in the blank, whatever it is you need support with. How do you know, it's a big question, but how do you know if the answer is yes to the second question? This is really important.
It's your values, I mean, ask yourself what the stakes are. What would happen if I didn't handle this? If I didn't work out, I'm going to have a very uncomfortable and limited last few decades of my life. If I don't pay my bills or organize my money, I'm going to go broke and be very uncomfortable. And I know about that. I know that game. Yeah. What are the stakes?
What are the stakes? Do you sometimes need help identifying what the stakes are when it comes to decisions in your business? Or do you really trust your intuition about what you need to do to move your business forward?
Sometimes I think you need help recognizing it. So in my work ghostwriting for business leaders like Kirsten Jordan, who is on $1 Million Listing New York, she is the one who really helped me understand the cost of not having an assistant. All we see, and the same thing with living in New York. I just moved to New York and all I saw was the cost of living in New York. And once I spent a bit of time here, I realized the cost of not living in New York, So that's where mentors and coaches can provide a little bit of insight. Here's one tiny example of something that I learned. You might see an ad for Coca-Cola and say, I'm going to copy their style. They're one of the biggest companies. They know exactly what they're doing. I was reading this marketing book and they're like, tiny businesses cannot afford to copy Coca-Cola because Coca-Cola has an unlimited marketing budget and they can just put their image over and over and over and over and they don't need a call to action immediately. It's like, you need a call to action. You're a tiny business. You get one ad, And I was like, oh my gosh, like you can see how I couldn't see that structure before. And I can see it now when someone points it out. And that's something that you wouldn't even, it's like a black swan when you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, I love that. You're highlighting something that is really important to me, which is that I want to surround myself with mentors and experts and colleagues who are really good at asking me questions, right? Who are really good at mirroring things back to me. But it's a red flag for me when I'm around people who tell me what to do, right? Who say the right thing for you, you need to hire an assistant. Like, you don't know if I need to hire an assistant. That's
I do that to people.
It's tricky. It's tricky because that's the capitalist conditioning in all of us. It's like, okay, I'm just going to tell you what to do. And then I'm going to pay someone else to tell me what to do. But what's really so deeply transformative is being with people who ask us the questions that help us discern our own answers to what is it that I need to do. And that's just really showing up for me here in the way you're talking about these two questions. Right? Have I always struggled with this? Okay, that's something that you are going to know the answer to. Have you always struggled with? You're the only one who can know the answer to that question. But this second question, is how important is this? Is this important enough to invest in getting the support? Sometimes we know the answer to that, but often I sit with people who are really confused about the answer to that question. They're like, I don't know, what is the next thing that's going to help me move forward? And I like this example that you're sharing about the way this person asked, reflected questions back to you about being in New York and the cost of not being in New York that really helped you discern like, oh yeah, this actually is something that's vitally important for my future. Yeah. And I think just connecting it back to everything you're saying about your ADHD experience, that for you, the decision about what's right for you, it is so unique to Paulette, the answer to the question. Like your teacher couldn't tell you how to do it. A mentor couldn't tell you how to do it. Paulette has to figure out how to do it. And when you do, you just hit this sweet spot where life becomes a lot easier, it sounds like.
And that's what's so bananas about ADHD is how it manifests. Like I always feel like I'm broke because I have ADHD, and I have friends who are rich because they have ADHD, and their money is the thing they love to hyper focus on. I'm like, damn it, why didn't I get that one?
Great question. I have no idea. I have no answer for you. Let's talk a little bit about when you entered the freelancing space, like when you became, I know a lot of freelancers don't think of themselves as small business owners, but you are. You should. You absolutely should. So when you became a business owner, you started freelancing and you started, expanding into these other offerings, these other areas. Where did you notice yourself really struggling with your ADHD symptoms?
Understanding, just always feeling like I was doing it wrong and that I didn't understand the scope of everything I had to do to make sure I got it right. I also, paperwork and forms are my kryptonite. Just if you bring a form near me, I'll be like, oh, get it away. On physical paper too. It's like, why are we doing this? I have terrible handwriting, which is a symptom of ADHD. And so it's like, it's terrible handwriting, this paper form. So all the forms, governmental stuff, like form EA45, I'm in a coma.
Yeah.
I'm gone. And really the going through a process. I'm great at creating something new, creating systems. I am not good at executing this first, then this, then this. So
moving through this linear process.
Yes. So things like cashing checks, being like, hey, when are you guys going to send that check? And they're like, we showed that you cashed it 4 days ago. You're like, cool, I'll talk to you later. Thanks, bye. I'm just going to go hide under my covers for a little bit. So embarrassing. And really just the cash flow and just, I still haven't quite figured out. It's just cash flow stuff, the, bookkeeping, forget it. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
What led to you finally going through the official assessment process, getting the diagnosis? I want to hear that story.
So this is wild. So I was working for Nir Eyal, who wrote Hooked, and he was writing a book called Indistractable. And so I was interviewing Ned Hollowell about culturally induced kind of attention issues. And I was sleeping in what I sleep in. And I get a phone call that wakes me up and he says, hey, it's Ned Hollowell. We have a meeting right now. And I was like, oh. And I just started doing the interview, wearing what I was wearing to bed. And
what were you wearing?
Just let that be in the listener's imagination.
Okay, that's a bold move.
And feeling very uncomfortable that this conversation was going on under those circumstances. And so we were just, having a conversation. I always joke during interviews, there is a method where you kind of say something to make the person more comfortable, but they're always kind of a conversation. I'm a talker. I have ADHD. And so we were just getting to talking about distraction and how hard it is. And, he says to me, he's like, hey, I think you sound like you have ADHD. I think you should get tested. And he goes, you have a great center there in Seattle. I'll send you the contact info. And this was the year that I was writing my book. I got $9,000 for my book in 2 payments. And it took a very long time and a lot of work to make. So I lived in a tiny place that year in Seattle. It was 150 square feet. I was working from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. every day, and I made $20,000 that year.
Whoa.
And so I went to take the test. It was $260. And I just was like, I don't have $260. So I did an online quiz, and it was high likelihood of ADHD. And I was like, ha, 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 because I thought ADHD was as it seems to be named for, that you have trouble with distraction. And that was the only thing that ADHD is. So it didn't seem very important to get fully tested. Cut to 4 years later, I'm still just really struggling. And I'm like, what is the deal? And I was talking to my sister and I'm like, all right, let's just bite the bullet. Let's just do it. So I go to get diagnosed over the phone with the center. And it's called the Hallowell Center, same as the last name of the guy because he's the founder.
Oh.
And so he was like this
You've
super
come
big
full
deal
circle.
guy. Full circle. So when I was taking the test with the guy, I was like, oh yeah, I was talking to Ned Hallowell. And he got all like starstruck. He was like,
you talked to Ned?
oh my gosh. He goes, what was he like?
Oh my God.
I was like, oh my gosh, this like super big deal guy told me I had ADHD and I didn't listen to him. And so then the test was like in the middle of my day. I had all this stuff planned afterward. And, you know, he goes through the questions and he goes, well, one of them was like, do you have trouble with organization? And I was like, not now that I like had to design a freaking piece of software to get organized and like hit rock bottom and make it like the center of my life. And, you know, but I was like, yeah, like historically, yes. So we finished the test and he's like, well, it's not often you get 20 out of 20. I was
Whoa.
like, cool. Yeah, cool.
You aced it.
So aced it. Total, yeah. 100%.
How did you feel
Hundo.
in that moment?
I felt, yeah, like I said, like I had stuff on my calendar to do. And I was like, nope, I need a minute. And like, it was like a kind of nausea, sad, you know, just like just a total paradigm shift for my whole life. And I think there were tears. I mean, there's often tears. There's been tears for less. But then really, as I learned more about it, like such a blooming sense of like grace for myself and self-compassion, that has been just such a gift.
Wow.
Because before you think like, why can't I do this? Why can't you just this? Why can't you just that? And then you learn about ADHD and you're just like, oh, that's why. Cool. And then you meet people who also have it. And you're like, yeah, I mean, I wrote about ADHD and personal finance for the New York Times. And like the closing quote I used was this woman saying, so maybe I'm not as bad a person as I thought I was.
Wow.
And that just hit me in the heart. And I actually interviewed Ned Hallowell for that story under normal circumstances. And I was
fully clothed, you mean?
Yes. And I just had tears streaming down my face the whole interview. And, you know, I like muted myself. So like I held it together till talk and like he doesn't know. But like he's so positive about ADHD and his whole thing is like unwrap the gift. And, you know, he gives to people what I want to give to writers who have ADHD, which is like this acceptance and celebration and compassion.
Wow. Acceptance, celebration, compassion. That's huge right there. I'm so grateful to Ned for stumbling into your life that fateful morning. And I hear a parallel here to the stories I hear so many people, friends, colleagues, clients share with me, which is that there's often this moment where somebody plants the seed or an internet quiz plants the seed. Like somewhere along the way in adulthood, a seed is planted that like, hey, maybe you have ADHD. Maybe this thing is true. And then I hear people go through this journey of ambivalence and avoidance and eventually landing in this moment that so many of us land in for different reasons in our life where the truth is just mirrored back to us so clearly we can't ignore it anymore. Like we just see it for what it is. And I hear that in this moment where you get this assessment, you're 20 out of 20, you're A+ on the ADHD assignment. And it's just like a reckoning. This moment is a reckoning with the truth. And it's a moment where everything changed for you going forward. Everything changed. So tell us about the change. As you accepted this and leaned into the celebration and the gifts, what happened in your life?
My self-talk really changed. You know, the sense of belonging definitely changed because they think about 5% of people have ADHD, right? So 1 out of 20, you're going to be 1 out of 20 people. So if you're the only one in your friend group, which is very common and likely, especially since it's, you know, it's funny, I tend to attract really like calm-centered people in my life because I'm the chaos monster. So seeing the content on, Dr. Sasha and How to ADHD, and so many people talk about it, and you're just like, oh my gosh. So, ADHD friends and I will just send things back and forth. We're like, oh my gosh, that's from ADHD, that's from ADHD, that's from ADHD, and I've joked about, I don't want to make it my whole personality, but I was like, I've kind of realized it is my whole freaking personality.
Yeah.
So, yeah. It's just so many things. The other thing is rejection sensitive dysphoria, or RSD.
What is that?
Really embarrassing about ADHD is that a lot of the symptoms are generally what you would think of as what a child would do and not an adult. So it's really hard to feel like a fully grown adult. So according to the Cleveland Clinic, rejection sensitive dysphoria is when you experience severe emotional pain because of a failure or feeling rejected. This condition is linked to ADHD, and experts suspect it happens due to differences in brain structure. Those differences mean your brain can't regulate rejection-related emotions and behaviors, making them much more intense.
Whoa.
Ugh. So
Wow.
it's so embarrassing. So like my friends would be like, you're so sensitive. But it's like to a point where it's just and I think that's the hard thing about like when you feel kind of like financially separated from what other people can do or financially rejected from the world,
Like because you can't
From the
afford
world of-
something?
Yeah, like, and I think especially as I get older, like a lot of my friends are really financially successful, and I didn't think about when I became a writer. They're like, oh, maybe you won't make much money, right? Maybe you will. I'm fine. I'm going after that. So I hope I do in the future, but like, it's tough. And the thing that I didn't think about was how it would feel when you're the only one not making any money, or the only one making less money than your friends, and coupled with impulse shopping. So chaos city. And so, yeah, you just are very sensitive to rejection, which is great for writers.
I was
don't
about
get
to
any
say,
rejection.
you're a freelance writer.
know.
Like, you're getting rejected all the time.
I know.
How are you coping with that?
Alcohol. No, I'm just kidding.
A stiff drink, Mad Men style.
Kind of joking. Yeah, it was funny. I went to a networking event last night that was like very intense. It was actually the first time I publicly advocated for myself. They had it in this bar that had this long hallway, and then it opened to this tin box of a room with no carpeting or anything. And there were probably 40 women in there doing a networking event. And I mean, it was like their voices were drumming on my eardrums. It was very uncomfortable for me because ADHD people can have sensory issues, and I do. And we did like group work, and I've always hated when we did like separate group work in a classroom and there was so much conversation. So I said, is it okay if we go in the hallway? And I kind of felt like I was like putting people out or whatever. And then I was like, oh, sorry, it's like an ADHD thing. It's just the noise is really loud for me. And I was like, oh God, I'm being like the ADHD girl right now. But then we got in the hallway and like the other people in my group were like, oh my God, this is so much nicer, right? So even to normies,
I love that.
it was intense. So
What
yeah,
a beautiful moment of self-advocacy.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No, I definitely was self-conscious about it. And I was like, but I didn't drink at that networking event. And I think, there's a lot of substance abuse in the ADHD community, which I've had not with alcohol. Like alcohol, it was like, not great. Like my young 20s, the discomfort I was feeling last night at this networking event. And I was like, sit with it. Like, you're very uncomfortable, but I'm living in New York. I'm going to be going to networking events 3 times a week.
Yeah.
I don't want to be drinking 3 times a week. I'm 42. It's not that cute in the morning anymore. So
They don't bounce back quite as quick.
Yeah. But I was like, the part of the discomfort I'm feeling at this networking event is this rejection sensitive dysphoria where you're just always comparing yourself to other people is how I experience it.
I want to take 2 steps back because I have witnessed you doing something else to cope with rejection that I think is really brilliant. Tell the listeners about your decision to publicize your rejections on social media and why you do that.
Yeah. So a big part of my writing life happened when I moved from Florida to Seattle, where I was for 10 years. And they have a great writing center there called Hugo House. And you're around writers. You take classes with them. You see them at events, and the distance is closed. And up close, nobody looks as cute or pretty or young in their author's photo as they do at a party, right? Everyone, once you start talking to them, is freaked out and unsure and full of self-doubt. And even if they have multiple books published, you're like, oh, like that never goes away. So in my book, Welcome to the Writer's Life, I dove into a lot of what it's really like to be a writer. And so, you know, also on my website, I have my author's bio, and then I have rejections, humiliations, and something else. But it's like basically written in the style of an author's bio, but it's okay, here's what else happened while all that other stuff was going on. And it's a gift when someone is vulnerable like that and says, yeah, me too. Oh yeah, no, I had to move back in with my mom after Peace Corps for 8 months, you know? So I posted one and people were like, yeah, one rejection letter. So just screenshotted a rejection letter.
Yeah.
And, you know, people were really grateful. They're like, okay, thank you. Yes, this, you know, this happens to everybody. And I just said, what if I posted every rejection letter? And what I love about that is just to show the cadence, you know, and kind of that exposure therapy of like, yeah, I get rejections all the time, you know? And I remember Roxane Gay talking about getting rejections. And she goes, of course I still get rejections. And I was like, what? Like Roxane Gay gets rejections? So I think that's like, you know, I'm certainly no Roxane Gay level, but just I am a professional writer, you know? And so just to show like, yeah, this is really part of it.
I'm learning a lot about this rejection sensitivity dysphoria from you right now. I'm going to be following up about this later. I'm like, oh God, I'm already just picturing all of these people I'm working with or who are in my life, or I'm like, oh wait, I think that's a big part of their emotional process and putting themselves out there, which you have to do as a business owner. That's like probably up there in the top 3 questions I get from people. Like, how can I be deeply rested and visible as a business owner? It feels impossible. And if you're coupling that with this rejection sensitivity, it's just, it feels really vulnerable and really challenging. And I think
and I'm about to go into a friends and family fundraising round, which I'm calling my rich acquaintances, because I'm not going to my friends and family, rich acquaintances round.
Yeah.
And he talked about like how many people I have to pitch and how many times I talk about it and ask for money. And I just said like, I was like, I'm about to go into a really vulnerable time.
Yes. Exposure therapy level 10.
Yeah. There's like in person asking for tens of thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Like it's going to be, holy crap, a lot.
Yeah.
So,
okay. Well, I'm sending you good vibes. And I just want to thank you because I think the way that you're modeling out loud publicly that rejection is a part of the process. Obviously, it's an acute part of the process for freelance writers or people who are pitching their work regularly. But it shows up for all of us in different ways. You know, if it's, you know, asking someone if they want to be your client or pitching your newsletter on a podcast, like there are ways in which we are all putting ourselves out there all the time. And I think the more people who are willing to say, like, hey, I get rejected all the time. Here's how it feels. Here's how I'm coping with it. The more we can normalize the experience and reduce that sensitivity overall. So I do feel like you're doing everyone a huge service by showing that out loud.
Yeah, I sent this, I was just looking at it. I sent this long message to someone who wanted to partner with me on my ADHD class. I'm like, I want to do this and da, and I'd love to have you and blah, 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 blah. It's like, oh, it's a block, right?
Yeah.
And she just wrote back, lowercase, just no. And I was just
that's it?
Yeah, that's it. I was like, I just laughed. I was like, okay.
That would have stung me. Like that feels
like, but there's a real power in getting beyond that. And I think not anything, but a lot of what is positive about my personality now came from this darkness and came from that struggle and came from what I really hated about myself. You know, I hate that I'm like an anxiety wuss. And so everyone sees like, you're so brave. It's because I was like, ew, don't be that person. I hate you a lot. And this is what, you know, my novel is about, is like self-acceptance and toxic love, etc. And yeah, I mean, I think it's like possible and it's those baby steps. And gosh, like the ADHD diagnosis just takes it takes the morality out of it. Yeah, that's really hard.
Beautiful.
And yeah, but it's not, I mean, it's, you read all the books, but not everybody you know reads all the books. Yeah. So that's hard.
You are painting this picture, and I'm going to reflect this back through my own experience, which is that people get diagnosed with ADHD, and then it seems like they fall into one of two camps. They are like you, and they're like, ADHD is now my whole personality. I talk about it all the time. I'm super out loud about it. I'm like weaving this into the tapestry of my life. And then there are people who really get stuck in the shame spiral around it.
Yes.
And they want to hide it and they don't want people to know and they don't want to accept it themselves. So I'm just curious for those listening who are more in the shame side of the ADHD discovery process, what do you want to say to those people?
Well, I was just watching this documentary called Love is Blind UK. And one of the guys on there talked about having ADHD and how his partner noticed, like, you know, you do this and you do this. And he's like, yeah, like, I don't usually tell people this, but I have ADHD. And man, and I've been very close to people who have really debilitating ADHD and don't talk about it at work. And to me, that seems like really shame-based behavior. It seems like hiding in a way. And it also seems like you don't feel you deserve the compassion or the accommodation that any physical disability would clearly, you know, warrant. And you might not feel shame about having that if it were a physical disability. So what the diagnosis helped me with is just like a lot of self-love. And I love myself enough to advocate for myself, even when people around me don't understand or people who love me don't understand. Like doing the research and like if you get in community, I think that will start to go away.
So get into community, shower yourself in self-love, be a little bit kinder, and don't hide from it.
Yeah.
That's what I'm hearing. I think it's really beautiful advice. You're also you have sprinkled in so much fantastic advice into this whole conversation about how you are making your business work for you as a person with ADHD. And some of the big things that are standing out to me as I'm talking through this with you now are the ways in which you give yourself permission energetically to show up in your business. Like you follow the flow of your energy. If you need to take a nap, you take a nap. If you find one of those hooks and you fall into hyperfocus, you celebrate that. You go there. You let yourself like follow the flow of your energy. You give yourself space to experiment with lots of different projects, different creative outlets. Like you give yourself so many options and permission at every turn to do what you're feeling called to do, to follow the flow of that energy. And on top of that, you have created a structure with the Writer's Mission Control Center to give you the organizational tools and strategy that you need to be productive in the capitalist material world, because we can't ignore that, right? We can't ignore that there's a certain way we're supposed to show up. Yeah. So it's the combo of the way you've combined the flow and the permission giving and the structure and organizational systems. It's the combo of those two things that I think really makes you somebody that needs to teach more about how to be a business owner with ADHD, because you're cracking some codes here.
Thank you. It does sound really nice when you describe it.
I'm just reflecting day-to-day facts.
The lived experiences, you know, I teach in the writing group that I teach with meditation. You know, I talk about it like it's like meditation, like being disorganized or like getting off track, just coming back, right? Just come back. Yeah. What are we doing? Oh, and like we're locked into a, you know, scroll time. Like, all right. I literally like I'm throwing my phone constantly away from me. Just like, no, on the couch. So yeah, and if you just keep trying to do it in the way that non-neurodivergent people do it and yelling at yourself that you should be able to do that, it's just more time wasted that you're not finding a structure that works for you.
Right. And it's deeper in the shame spiral, right? Like why, again, why am I not like everyone else? Why is this not working for me? Why am I the chaos monster? And as soon as you meet that questioning self with normalization, you know, because you have ADHD, and then you shower on the compassion and you celebrate the gifts that this gives to you, I see it's like you bloom, you blossom into this person who's like figuring out how to make it work.
Yeah. Yeah. I do feel that I'm there and closer every day for sure.
And the other piece of this equation that I love about you is that you are, again, you're so open and transparent about the way that you are still a chaos monster and probably always will be. We don't have to change that about yourself.
Yeah. Because that's where all the other stuff comes from. That's where all my story ideas and my jokes and, you know, it's the well of your
creativity.
Yeah. I do feel like I'm possessed by myself, but like I I have to like both sides, but like there's a lot that's really great about ADHD. So yeah, that's the way it is.
You can be the chaos monster. You can be organized. You can be creatively inspired. You can get shit done. You can do multiple projects. And that doesn't mean that any of it's perfect or easy or simple, but you are doing it. And that's what I really want people to hear in this conversation who identify with everything you're sharing about your ADHD experience is none of this has to hold you back from being deeply rested and wildly successful. You just have to do it in your own way. Yeah. And you model that so beautifully. You're doing it. Like, this is it. I think so many of us keep waiting. We're like, oh, okay, I'll feel like I've achieved when I get to this point. And then we're constantly moving the goalpost. We get there and we're like,
treadmill.
Yeah, and we just keep going. We keep going. No, Paulette, like, you are so tremendously successful where you are right now. And you have so much more coming. There's so much more ahead of you. But look at all of the things you've created and accomplished, and look at this just tremendous gift that you're giving the world by being honest about who you are and how you've struggled and how you've worked with your ADHD. It's like, if this isn't tremendous success, I don't know what is. And more money would be great too. So we'll just call that in. Yeah. So tell us, as we're wrapping up here, a little bit about this vision you have for the ADHD class for writers.
Yes. So I'm calling it Harnessing ADHD's Wild Horsepower.
Ooh.
Because I love that. There's so many horse metaphors.
You rode and you learned how to ride a horse. So I feel like we're coming full circle back to that moment as well.
Yeah, the horse I had was like he would be really stubborn going out, and then I would turn him around and he would want to bolt back to the barn. And I would just sometimes let the reins go, and we would gallop as fast as we possibly could. Wow. And that to me is like, that dopamine level is what a lot of like impulsive behavior feels like. It's like, just love that so much. So it's like, we are so powerful, but our power is going in so many different directions, and we waste it on shame and, yelling at ourselves. So I wanted to create a space in a 3-month class, and you're in a 3-month class with me, so you know what it's like. We create a community over 3 months, and friendships are born for sure. And just a lot of relationships happen in 3 months. You create a community. And so I want to create a space where everyone has ADHD. Everyone's trying to be a writer. And every session, we're going to learn a little bit about ADHD, have a guest speaker, some writing time and reflection time. And then to make it a little bit more ADHD friendly, you're going to have a crew of 3 other people that you do a breakout room with at the end, and just have a reflection time with just your crew. And they're going to be your accountability partners and your buddies throughout the entire class.
Wow. That sounds incredible. Where can people go if they want to learn more about this class with you?
They can go to pauletteperhach.com, and you will see Harnessing ADHD's Wild Horsepower. Link on the top.
That's amazing. Okay, so definitely go there if you want to check out Paulette's ADHD class. I just want to give you a shout out and say, even if you're listening to this conversation and you're not a writer and you have no interest in being a writer, I mean, everybody's really a writer. Okay, but if you don't identify as a writer, but you're a business owner, I think it is well worth your time to let Paulette into your inbox via her newsletter. I learned so much from your newsletters, Paulette, and from the places where you talk about rejection and you talk about your journey, and we get to witness you in real time doing your business in a way that works for you. It's just one of my favorite newsletters to open. So if people want to join your newsletter, how can they do that?
At pauletteperhach.com, you will find a newsletter sign-up form.
That's amazing. Anything else you want the people to know about?
You can also do That Writer Paulette, in case you can't write it down right now and can't remember my last name.
ThatWriterPaulette.com.
Yeah.
Yep. Great. We'll put all of these links in the show notes, of course. And Paulette, again, I'm just so grateful for your willingness to let ADHD be your personality, and for your vulnerability in showing us the real behind the scenes, what life has been like for you. I can't wait to see where you go next. Thank you so much.
Thank you, madam. I'm so glad to know you.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of Deeply Rested. If you enjoyed this conversation, I would love to invite you to join the Deeply Rested weekly newsletter. You can sign up at deeplyrested.com/newsletter. I hope to meet you in my inbox very soon.